Hello. On behalf of all of us at the Windsor-Essex Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Systems Leadership Table, we want to thank you for your interest in the development of our region's first ever Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Together, our goal is to build a community where everyone feels safe, has a sense of belonging, has access to services and opportunities, and can have their needs met across the region.
We want to hear from you. We want to understand what your priorities and concerns are for the safety and well-being of our community so that we can create a plan to advance the interests of all residents across Windsor and the County of Essex. So please make your voice heard by participating in our online survey,
or by registering for one of the virtual public meetings happening in each of the region's 8 municipalities. To get involved, visit us online at CSWB-Windsor-Essex.ca. And thank you from all of us.
So indeed, thank you from all of us. If we'll just go to the next slide, there's a little bit of housekeeping. I know we're almost a year into COVID, and so we're probably getting pretty used to how some of these things work, but just a couple of things to remember. First is to always try and mute yourself unless you're speaking. You can either use the mute button that's on your phone, if that's what you're coming to us through, or at the bottom of your screen at the left-hand side, if you roll your cursor over there, you'll see there's a mute button there. It looks like a little microphone, and you can use that. If you forget, or if there's a lot of uncontrolled background noise behind you, we might have to mute you if you don't realize you're making noise and you're disrupting the meeting. But don't worry, we'll unmute you as soon as possible, because we're actually here to hear you. We just want to hear what you have to say, not what might be going on behind you. And if you'd like to speak, then of course please unmute yourself, and then we're happy to hear you. When it comes to posing questions and comments, you've got two options. One is that questions can be posed by using the chat box, and you can post your question there just by typing it in, or you can also use your raise hand feature under the participants option. And if you click that, a little hand will go up and we'll know that you're wanting to say something. And we'll be monitoring the discussion. And what's really important here is it's a community safety plan. So obviously the safety of everybody who's participating is critical to us, not just the future safety of the community, but even that all starts right here and right now. So we reserve the right to delete any comments or remove participants who are making inappropriate comments, but I'm sure that's not why you're here. We understand that you're here because you care about the community and you want to help make a contribution to making it better. Now, one of the services that's offered here is there's closed captioning. And if you do require live closed captioning for the meeting, please enable that at the bottom of your screen, and you'll see we have a person here who's providing the closed captioning for us. And there's, I think, one or two people who've shown up who we weren't expecting, who have ambiguous names like iPad 3 or that sort of thing. And if you require closed captioning, just let us know through the chat, and we can make sure that we steer you towards a room, because when we get into the breakout rooms, one of them is going to have the closed captioning. So we can make sure that you get steered into the one that does. Just let us know if you require it, and if you don't, that's not a problem. Also, if you experience any technical issues, then just use the chat to send a private message to Lindsay Rive. Lindsay is our sort of minister of technology and fixing things that go wrong on the platform. But Zoom's a pretty amazing tool, and we're not anticipating any problems. So we hope that you have a very comfortable and good experience, and that we're able to hear just exactly what it is that you want to say. There's just one other thing I should mention, which is, obviously the camera function is great because it helps us communicate. But if you're not comfortable having your face on the camera, then that's obviously your prerogative. We certainly encourage anyone who wants to do so, because it increases the intimacy of the conversation, but that is entirely at your option. So just to use your own best judgment about what makes the most sense for you in that regard. If we can jump to the next slide, the agenda tonight, I guess we're right in the middle of the welcome and introductions, and then there'll be a brief overview of the process and some of the findings that we have from it, and an opportunity for questions and answers. And we'll try and move through that fairly quickly, because what we really want to do is get you into the breakout sessions. As you can see, there's quite a number of folks who've joined us tonight, which is just terrific, but it does mean that unless we find a way to sort of simulate being able to break out, it would be a little bit awkward for everybody to have a chance to say, and it wouldn't be much fun if we had to divide all the time by the number of people that we have, and you'd only have like a minute or two to contribute. So what we want to do is use the breakout groups to make sure that you have a chance in a more comfortable format of a smaller group of people, to ensure that you can make yourself heard and have your opportunity for the input. After we do the breakout sessions, as per usual, we'll do a report back and a group discussion, and take notes of what it is you have to say. But the various group leaders will help you figure that out, and the groups will be automatically generated. So you'll just find yourself whisked away to the various groups when the time comes. So, and more instructions on that when they come. And if we can just jump to the next slide, almost through the introductory stuff, just so you know who you're talking to. My name is John Matheson. I'm a partner at Strategy Corp. I spend an awful lot of my time working with municipalities all across the province. Delighted to be working here in Windsor-Essex again. I'm here with my colleagues, Brian Teefy and Olivia LaHaye. And then we also have a whole group of people from the team, and Leonardo Gill, who will introduce himself more formally in a moment. He's the project manager. Stephen Lynn, who you'll get to see, and who you see these guys have all kind of got their secret black versions of their photos up, but you'll get to see what they really look like in a few minutes. So Stephen Lynn, who's the manager of social policy and planning from Windsor. And then we also have Miss Michelle Sushiu, who's a support team member, and then Lindsay, who I already said is our technical whiz. And if you can just jump to the next slide. That takes us to the discussion of what is a community safety and well-being planning. And I'll turn it over to Leo, who I think is going to give you some background on the project and how Windsor-Essex are approaching this. And Leo's been working on this pretty much around the clock since we met back. You'll really enjoy hearing what he has to say. Over to you, Leo.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate the introduction. So yes, I am the project manager of the Windsor-Essex Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. And just for starters here, really answering the question, what is community safety and wellbeing planning? And really, it is truly about creating a collaborative approach to service delivery, one that involves multiple sectors and community partners, and is really focused on being proactive and preventative, all for the goal of addressing local priorities related to crime and complex social issues. And to do this, really, municipal and regional leaders are working together with partners across several different fields with the goal of creating a community where everyone feels safe, has a sense of belonging, has access to services and opportunities, and can have their needs met. And I think what's really important about these goals and the approach itself is that it recognizes that there are factors that influence our feelings of safety and well-being beyond whether a crime has occurred. It can be stigma, discrimination, even a lack of access to resources. Also, the approach recognizes that for every risk, there's a community strength, asset, and protective factor. And these should really be our starting blocks. And finally, that everyone has a role to play in improving safety and well-being within our communities and within the region. So I guess another question becomes, why are we undertaking this project now? And really, over the past 2 decades, provincial data and research focusing on how to address some of today's complex social issues have really highlighted the importance of prevention, of crime prevention, strengthening communities, and involving different sectors. And based on that research, really in 2018, the provincial government passed legislation that required all municipalities to prepare and adopt these community safety and well-being plans because they were found to be the best practice. If we can go to the next slide. A way to do that, really, when we're thinking of how to achieve this, we are fortunate that we have a planning framework. And in that framework, we are really identifying 4 different ways that we can intervene on some of these complicated issues. We can intervene at the very top through social development, that's that green ring, prevention, risk intervention, and incident response. And I'll walk you through some of these just so that we have a good background and understanding of what the goal of this framework is. If we start at the bullseye, at incident response, so right the red dot in the middle, that's how we commonly think of safety interventions. We tend to focus on that primarily from a policing or emergency services perspective. But as I was indicating, research really is showing that more and more often emergency services are responding to situations related to well-being that are symptoms of larger issues. It could be a mental health crisis, substance use challenge, or housing insecurity. And for these issues, first responders can't solve them alone. They can't deal with them alone. So that's something for us to consider. And another rationale for us to be looking at the upper rings of these concentric circles. So if we move up a layer to risk intervention, this really is focusing on reducing harm before it gets to the point of being an incident. And this type of work is not usually community or population wide. It's actually more so focused on providing wraparound type services to particular individuals in need. So if we move to the next layer, prevention, it's really more of that population or community-wide approach. And this is about proactively identifying and addressing local risks before they escalate. And really in this layer, it's easy to see that it involves all people, regardless of their expertise. To think of it in a different way, people in a neighborhood or in a community, you may even say yourself in your own neighborhood, you're more likely to be the first to notice a change, positive or negative, that's occurred in your area. And it's because you're in tune with your daily environment. You live it, you breathe it. And so it's your public consultation and individuals here in the room and throughout this consultation process, you're all a great resource for us to understand some of the challenges that our communities may be facing, but also to help us find protective factors and assets to meet those challenges and that change. And then finally at the top, at the green layer, social development, this is usually involving longer term investments or strategies that improve what are called the social determinants of health and well-being, or those underlying conditions that shape daily life. And really some examples of these include access to income, education, quality housing, to name a few. Another piece to know is with work within this layer usually looks beyond the incident and really focuses on the social causes or understanding that those causes need integrated and collective responses. So just to pull these concepts together a bit, if we start instead of focusing on the incident, the red dot, if instead we start at the top at social development, then we can work to build on protective factors and strengths. We can emphasize prevention and risk mitigation strategies. We can even utilize data and evidence-based practice and ultimately work to reduce the number of incidents that we need to respond to by really intervening before challenges become crises. Next slide, please. Now that we have a bit of background on the project, I want to just quickly jump into the Windsor-Essex approach and really let you all know that the plan will be developed using a joint city-county approach. And what I mean by that, while we are developing this through regional collaboration, the plan will include appendices and data profiles for each municipality. And the intent here is to ensure that the local priorities for each municipality are identified and understood. Because as you know, there are major differences between challenges that may be occurring in Windsor and in Lakeshore or in Essex. It doesn't mean that those challenges are more or less of an issue. It's more about that there are different circumstances that we need to consider when trying to address those challenges. So guiding the plan development of this as well is actually two different tables here, two different teams. We have the regional community safety, the regional CSWB systems leadership table, as well as the enhanced sector network. The systems leadership table is made up of leaders from across different sectors like health and mental health, education, community and social services, law enforcement, and public safety. And the enhanced sector network is consisting of frontline staff, members from community organizations and committees that work alongside 8 historically underrepresented communities. These communities include First Nations and Indigenous peoples, racialized peoples, newcomers, youth, seniors, 2S LGBTQ+ folk, accessibility communities, and then broader community groups. And overall, we're working together to try to narrow down the focus of some of the priorities we want to work on. We're taking this as a living document approach or a living approach where we're trying to have a starting block that we're going to build upon over time. And ultimately, our objectives for this plan is to identify priority risk factors within our communities, identify strategies to reduce those risk factors, and then set measurable outcomes so that we can track progress and see how we're doing to achieve those goals. If we can go to the next slide, please. So ultimately, this plan is really focusing on taking advantage of existing community strengths, resources, and best practice, because we have several great partnerships that already occur in the community. It's really about seeing how we can utilize those, leverage those, and make those strategies grow, and also use those to help us develop proactive approaches to address the identified local risks. Overall, the plan's benefits will lead to enhanced communication, and this is something that we find across the province, that these plans tend to have the following benefits of enhancing communication across different agencies, organizations, and sectors, increasing our understanding of some of the local risks and some of the challenges that particular communities or groups may be facing. Also, ensuring that services are provided to individuals with complex needs. And lastly, to have an increased awareness, coordination, and access for services for community members and vulnerable groups. And I think what's really vital here in terms of this is that this is going to be something that will be, in terms of this plan development, is that we are looking to have a better understanding of some of these local issues. And as we go into the implementation phase, once the municipalities endorse the plan, then we can start focusing on how to, again, affect change on those. So I'll talk to you about the process so far. If we can go to the next slide. And so this is a project that has been occurring over some time, but because of COVID, as with many things, the project was put on a pause for a brief period of time. As of the relaunch in June 2020, we were able to develop a current state data report and an interactive asset map, and that map includes resources and community assets across Windsor and Essex County. Both of these, the current state data report and the map, will be made public in the coming weeks. We also completed presentations informing elected officials and municipal councils across the region so that they have a better understanding of some of the approaches that we're taking. In addition to that, through our enhanced sector network, we were actually able to engage 96 frontline staff and representatives from existing committees and organizations. And again, helping us have a better idea of contextualizing some of that data so that we don't lose sight of the fact that those numbers are connected to people and connected to challenges that they may be facing. So we want to make sure that we do understand that from multiple perspectives and lenses. The other piece of this too is that once we've completed our public consultation and have analyzed the data, in terms of our next steps, we will be developing the final report and submitting that to municipal and county councils for adoption. And then from there, that would go to the province. We expect the plan to be fully completed and made public by the end of the year. So with that, if we go to the next slide, if there are any questions about that approach so far, I know sometimes we go a bit quick in some of that information, but please raise your hand or send a message to Michelle to ask any questions. So I do see one message in the chat about when we will go to council. So the goal here is that we would be focusing on going to council in about October, November. Again, that would be then having it fully submitted by the end of the year.
There's no other questions, Leo.
Okay, great.
Oh, we have one.
With limited access to technology. So I did see that. Thank you very much for that question. So we are looking at ways that we can increase our reach. And I think one of the things that we're doing currently is actually having some printed surveys available for different groups. In one case, we're connecting with the Community Housing Corporation so that we can have different printed surveys available for residents. We are also looking at having that online survey that would be available for individuals. And for each of these virtual town halls, they do have phone-in options to ensure that if an individual has access to a phone, they could still be a part of the conversation. So those are some of the approaches that we are taking and hoping that we can then increase our reach because of the strange circumstances that we're all in and how those restrictions limit us, but it's for appropriate and necessary reasons.
Great. Well, unless there's any more questions, and actually, I'm just going to ask questions. Anybody having any trouble with the technology? because then that would be a great time to wave or to put up your hand, and we can help deal with that. We don't want you to be frustrated through the whole session if there's anything going wrong. Otherwise, and unless anybody else has any questions for Leo, what we'll do is we'll roll along, and I can introduce.
John,
Sorry,
Yep.
1 second. I think I saw another question.
there is a question from Peter.
Hi, Peter. In terms of for the racialized communities, we do have approximately 15 individuals that we're connecting with through that process. And again, this is something that we are looking at, throughout this process, how we're connecting with committees that have a larger reach, so that we can connect with more individuals through the virtual town halls and the online survey as well, to expand our reach there.
And Richard's question as well.
Oh, I didn't catch that one. So when it comes down to other community partners, we've actually we created this notification list. And so the reason for it is we know that we would love to have everyone at the table, but just because of capacity issues and being able to kind of have everyone speak, that's just not possible. So instead, what we've done is we've reached out by ensuring that key community organizations are informed of the process that we're taking, including, again, the virtual public meetings and that online survey. So we have sent information over to the mission.
There's no other questions at this time.
Great. I'm looking forward to hearing your points throughout this the breakout sessions. Thank you.
Great. So Olivia, why don't you take us through the next section?
Great. So as Leo mentioned, we did conduct a current state data report, the purpose of which was to create a baseline and help assess the safety and well-being in the communities as it stands right now, and also help identify areas of future improvement. The report, as Leo mentioned, is very much it's clinical, I guess, right? It does lack the context of these consultations, which is why we hold them, but it did look at a number of data sets provided by housing and family services organizations from municipal partners, police services across the region, StatsCan, as well as a number of provincial indicators and measurements, including things like EQAO. And the point of this was to basically look at the data sets as they exist. Some of them are a bit dated, some of them, are very focused, but the point was to look at the data that currently exists and see what that could tell us about the current state of safety and well-being across the region. We looked at a broad range of categories that are shown below. That Leo kind of mentioned how, we're not just looking at crime or incidents of crime, we're looking at the broad range of factors that might lead to crime or other illegal behavior. And so part of the reason we show these categories is to, get your juices flowing in terms of thinking very broadly about safety and well-being, and thinking across a broad range of categories and what that means and how that impacts safety and well-being in everyone's communities. Next slide, please. So based on the current state report, we do have municipal profiles, and we'll share the Windsor one. And I, again, just to upfront say that these are based on very specific data sets. They provide a pitch, one side of an image of the City of Windsor that we continue to build out to fill the gaps in the data, as well as to provide further context through discussions with several stakeholders. So next slide, please. So from the current state data report, we found a number of things. The first being obviously that Windsor is, the urban center of the region. It's the largest and most diverse municipality in the region. And so that brings along with it several challenges that the city has to face. The city has higher crime rates and more severe crime than regional averages. Also has higher average or a lower average household income than the regional average, as well as higher rates of child poverty. People in the city have to spend a larger portion of their income on shelter costs than the regional average, and more people tend to need to rent their homes as opposed to owning them. And of course, something that is a serious crisis across Canada, but the city has had more opioid-related deaths than the rest of the county, and the opioid crisis is something that the city continues to face. That being said, educational attainment as of 2016 was in line with regional averages, which is certainly something that is a good news situation. The city's strategic vision includes a number of priorities that are much more broad, but what we've done here is pull out those that relate specifically to community safety and well-being plan, community safety and well-being priorities, and they include attracting and creating new jobs by diversifying the economy and leveraging partnerships across sectors, strengthening neighborhoods to ensure they are safe and alleviate poverty, celebrating Windsor's multicultural identity, and supporting a diverse population's unique needs across those communities. On the other side of the slide, you can see there's a number of statistics that have been pulled from StatsCan. It's worth noting that those are from 2016. But as I said, the point of this is to kind of provide a snapshot of one perspective of the city and kind of start to look at where the priorities moving forward should be. So next slide. John, do you want to direct people through this one? Oops, you're muted.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Olivia?
All right, so the point of that was basically just to get everyone's kind of mind going on what their priorities are and what they want to talk about in the breakout sessions. We have assigned the breakout groups randomly into groups of 6 or 8. I think we had planned on 8, but depending on who registered or actually showed up, that's the rough number that we're aiming for. Each room is going to be hosted by a member of our teams, either from Strategy Core or the City of Windsor or Workforce. And the point of the host will be to help guide you guys through some discussion questions. We have 5 discussion questions, and the host is there to make sure everyone gets a chance to contribute, as well as making sure that we get to hear your input on all 5 questions that we've set up. So after that activity, we'll all come back and hopefully debrief together as a group and kind of see if we can pull out some key themes that were found in each discussion and hear a broader set of perspectives, given that we'll all be talking in our smaller groups, and then we want to share as a larger group together. With that said, just a couple of reminders about muting and unmuting yourself. Myself, I have had, I don't see a raised hand. However, the reactions, clapping, thumbs up, the emoji, you can use one of those emojis to indicate that you'd like to speak if you'd like to, and they work just as well as a hands up. But you're also in the smaller groups, likely free to speak as long as everyone's respectful. Either way, and you can also use the chat function as we've been using in this larger group. So with that, I think I'll leave it to Lindsay to send everyone to their groups. Please ensure that when you are sent to your breakout room, that you do click join and not cancel or something like that, because you might get stuck in the main group, which no one will be left in. However, if you have any problems, do just send Lindsay a private message.
All right, with that, we just have someone joining us right now, so I will put that individual in a group. And with that, we'll be able to go right into our breakout groups.